I mean, it is just mind blowing. I've done, you know, so many segments, going after people like you and Tucker Carlson. I just can't get over what has happened in the last couple of years, especially since Trump got elected. People started telling the truth. Tucker started telling the truth about war. He started telling the truth about Syria. And he started telling the truth about Ukraine. And he started telling the truth. He brought Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on to tell the truth about Big Pharma. And it's just amazing to see that kind of work. And then you did.
Well, I think there's a Venn diagram of left and right, you know, and I like to say, like, I'm an investigative reporter. Some would call it cinema verite. Like, I just capture people in their own words, right? That's what I do. I'm not a pundit. I don't offer color commentary. I just sort of show you what it is. And in many regards, like, my favorite spot you ever did, Jimmy, was the one you did on the New York Times reporting about me after the FBI raid.
So tell people about that. No, so just remind people what that was about.
This was the FBI raided my home, which is an extraordinary series of events. It was like right after the Ashley Biden diary was sent to me by tipsters a year later. So the New York Times somehow gets a copy of my attorney-client privileged communications after that happened, and they write this article, okay? And the article, they find a document the attorneys wrote. They find a document, and in these documents, it's basically, I'm very proud of these documents. The documents articulate I don't do anything illegal, and I make sure that I'm not doing anything illegal. So the headline is, documents show how far deceptive reporting practices could go before running afoul of federal laws. This is the New York Times headline for national security reporter teams. And you said so poignantly, in other words, we check with our lawyers to make sure we didn't break the law. But rather than say we check with we don't break the law, they had to write this 4-line sentence. I actually used this clip that you did in all of my presentations. It's almost like you have to put it through a kaleidoscope.
Yes,
you have to like put it through a prism to understand what the hell they're saying. And I'm trying to answer your point, to your point about why you and Tucker and me, and we're so different, but why? Just show the reality. Just, you don't need to use innuendo and hyperbole and all these words. That's the problem. And there's a gap between how things are portrayed and what they actually look like. So that's what we try to do. What I've been trying to do for 15 years is show people in their own words. Obviously, the New York Times there had to word it that way. It
was funny the way they did. It was so obvious that they said, well, James O'Keefe is checking with his lawyers to see just how far he can go without breaking the law. Isn't that what you should do? That's what you're supposed to be doing, making sure we're not breaking the law. Is this undercover technique legal? If it is, it
was also deceptive reporting practices before running afoul of the. I mean, even the words afoul of the law. It's just they're just using mind mapping things to create an impression in the reader that's so far. I mean, we spent more on lawyers, Jimmy. I mean, I spent almost as much on lawyers as payroll for 60 people. We were so lawyered up. We have a whole ethics curriculum that I developed with like hundreds of books. We spent more time on ethics and on consent laws, and they're weaponizing that against me like that's a bad thing. Like, so it's a lot of torture to do this sort of work. I like to say you have to be a masochist. You have to like pain to pursue truth or to do the sort of investigative work. But, you know, like the old World War II bomber said, you get flack when you're over the target. And I guess nowadays the amount of flack you get is directly proportional to how good of a journalist you are.
And so that's quite an arc for you, right? Because when I was introduced to you is when you did what was the first big, what was it called?
Acorn.
That was it. And so that was deceptively edited, and I was upset about it. My producer used to work for Acorn, was upset. So that was our first introduction to you. Now you've gone more to this. It's still that same undercover style, but this seems like you are applying ethics to it now, right?
Yeah, I mean, we could get into the debate about the Acorn thing, I suppose, but it was that was looked at by the New York Times ombudsman. This is 2009. For those of you who are watching and don't know what I'm talking about, this is an undercover investigation into a group that did housing and got federal money. And I went in there as a pimp, presented myself as a pimp. I was not dressed like a pimp, but I said I wanted to start a brothel with underage girls, and my colleague was wearing a prostitution getup, and they told us how to lie on our taxes and that. I think a lot of the editing criticisms were a little unfair. The New York Times went through the raw tapes and said nothing was taken out of context. Nevertheless, the main criticism people had that perhaps was slightly fair was in the B-roll. I was wearing the pimp fur, right? Didn't actually wear it into the office, so people said that that was presented a different way. But no, we're very, very scrupulous with our editing. And people say, well, you need to release the raw tape. Well, nobody releases the raw tape in journalism ever. 60 Minutes doesn't. And further, you don't want to compromise your sources. You don't want to. Sometimes you have to redact certain things, like people go to the bathroom with a hidden camera. I can't air that. So it's a debate that we could have. But Jimmy, over the years, people stopped talking about the editing of what I'm doing. It's like now they just want to hurt me. And in fact, when the FBI raided my home, the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, came to my defense, which is pretty groundbreaking, I think.
So then everything started to shift. And then when I saw the New York Times and the FBI conspiring illegally to try to take you down, because that's what they were doing. Now this should be a concern for everybody. And I tried to expose that, right? That garbage that the New York Times was saying, and the obvious collusion that they were in with the FBI. It looked like to me. Can you speak to that?
I mean, the national security reporters, Adam Goldman is his name, Mark Mazzetti, clearly work in symbiosis with the feds. I actually confronted, I don't know if you can find this, if this is live or in post-production, but I confronted Adam Goldman in the street in January of this year.
Yes, I did see that.
And it was very, this was about as passionate as you'll ever see me. I was more righteously indignant. I called him a Fed boy. I said, Fed boy, because why are they conspiring with and in concert with the FBI? I mean, they should be questioning the government, right? Like, look back to Seymour Hersh. I've actually read Seymour Hersh's books. There's a book he wrote called The Reporter, the massacre. He won the Pulitzer Prize for reporting in Vietnam. Whatever happened to that? And I guess it's because when I was raided by the FBI, within minutes of the raid, I got a text message from the New York Times. And how do they have the contents of a grand jury subpoena when I barely even have the thing in my hand? So clearly they're acting together. It's wrong, but I think it creates a opportunity for citizens out there, people watching this, that are very cynical about what I'm saying and rightfully slightly disillusioned by how horrible it is. Keep in mind that, you can do this. If you're close to the scene of the crime, or if you're inside of an institution, the organization I work for will give you a hidden camera and expose it. So it's bad that the New York Times is acting in concert with the FBI, but it's an opportunity for people out there to go out and do the citizen journalism themselves.
And so what was that? What was the final? Is that over, that whole case with the New York Times and you?
It's currently in the courts. There was a search warrant executed. A special master was appointed. If you don't know what that is, it's a retired judge, because the federal judge said that there probably should be someone handling all this information that was gathered off of my phones. They took my 2 iPhones and they still have them. And it's remarkable for a journalist to be raided by the FBI. I'm not sure that's ever happened before in the United States of America, particularly a publisher or Project Veritas reporters to be raided by FBI agents. It's not illegal for us to receive information, even if it was stolen. We didn't steal it, but even if it was stolen by someone else, that's the Pentagon Papers case, Bartnicki v. Vopper, 2001. So it's very bizarre. And right now, where it is there are some motions sitting on the federal judge's desk. The ACLU, the Reporters Committee, have filed letters to unseal the affidavits. We want to know what the probable cause was, why they were going into my home with guns and taking our notebooks. But this is what's happening in our society, and we have to decide what type of country we want to live in, and whether we want to just incarcerate the other person because they don't have the same public policy views as you and I. I don't think that's right. I don't believe in that. If Trump did it, I would be the first person to stand up and be against it. But a lot of people in this country, Jimmy, they want to jail their political opponents just because they disagree with them. And that's, I think that line in the sand was drawn in my case. I think seeing the ACLU come to my defense was a good thing.
Yeah, that was a good thing that they didn't play party politics and they stood up for, journalism, free speech. Now, this was all over the FBI. You had gotten a hold of the diary, right, of Joe Biden's daughter's diary. Someone had given it to you, and the FBI, and that's what this is all about, them raiding you over that, right?
Yes, we asked Joe Biden for comment. Our attorney sent him a letter, asked him for comment, gave him a deadline, and Rachel Maddow did this whole segment about how this was extortion for us to ask him for comment. This is so crazy that if you brought this stuff to Netflix, people would laugh at you. It's truth is always stranger than fiction. The way this went down, and so then the Ashley Biden's lawyer, a woman named Roberta Kaplan, who's a big time lawyer, she's representing a lot of these plaintiffs. She sent that correspondence to the Southern District of New York, basically, and I know that because we were accidentally CC'd on the correspondence, and the FBI. And you can't make any of this up. You think I'm lying, but I'm not. And then on November 5th, 2021, November 5th, at 6 a.m., which is pitch black in New York. I live in the suburbs of New York. About 10 or so agents came to my home, banged on my door. They had big mag lights. They had FBI on their bulletproof vests, and they had guns. And they put me in handcuffs, and they basically pillaged my apartment for 2 hours. There's not much in my small apartment, but they were able to take my phones. I unlocked my phone to call my lawyer, and then they took the phone out of my hand and put it in an evidence bag. So they must have changed the settings to keep it unlocked. It's very terrifying. And I don't break the law. I've never broken the law, but when they start working with New York Times reporters to leak your personal things and your attorney memos, I mean, that's just so beyond anything I could have ever imagined. And it was a very terrifying experience, but I guess it makes you stronger and more resilient for having gone through it.
Okay, and in fact, if I'm trying to remember the story now, but didn't you contact the FBI and say you had the diary, that someone had given it to you and you wanted to see if they could verify it? Or what was the story on that?
The diary, we were not certain that it was authentic. For example, it could have been a forgery.
Right.
We hired a handwriting expert to verify it. Like people always say that I'm so unethical, but if I was really a political hit artist, I would have just published it to hurt Joe Biden. In fact, some people thought that I should. I was concerned it was legitimate. I was also concerned that the things that were written in the diary actually happened. Ashley Biden, the Biden children are troubled. So it was unclear to me that the things that they wrote in there were just musings or were legitimate, even if it were real. So I decided not to publish it, and I brought it to law enforcement in Delray, Florida, where it can be returned to its rightful owner, whoever that is. So we did everything in our power to do the right thing and to do what a journalist ought to do if something lands on your lap, and we were punished for it. And that's the kind of Kafkaesque nature of where we are in society, obviously. And it goes back to what you said at the beginning of this segment, which is experts say credentialed journalists. Well, you're not a journalist, O'Keefe, so you're not entitled to the privileges of the First Amendment. Well, if the New York Times is in concert with FBI agents, we're going to need citizens to take the mantle.
Hey, everybody, check out my new stand-up special, COVID Lies Are Funny, only $10. And come see us live in Syracuse, Cohoes, New York, Hartford, Los Angeles, Bakersfield, Baltimore, San Francisco, Huntington Beach, and more. Pottstown, even. Go to jimmydore.com for a list of all of our things and see you there.